Alright, YouTube, Occult Literature video number 39, The Testament of Solomon, probably one of the more famous works overall. It's right up there with the Rosary of the Philosophers or the Grand Grimoire or something like that. The Testament of Solomon is a very early work. It's literally ancient. It comes from maybe the 1st century AD, so it's not a Renaissance or medieval era work, although it certainly does inform a fairly large amount of magical practice that comes later. I can think of certain things from, for instance, the Lesser Keys of Solomon. The idea of the magical ring of Solomon is taken straight out of the Testament of Solomon. Now, as always, there's a link in the description to where you can purchase my edition of this work off Amazon, and a second link to my books blog, a great many other materials being available there on everything from dark magic to the healing arts, alchemy, folk magic rites, a little bit of everything. Now, the Testament of Solomon should be partially seen as an occult work in the sense that it speaks quite literally about demons. There's a demon Onias that's like sort of pestering one of Solomon's little slave boys, and then he goes forth and he captures this demon. He manages to bring forth a whole horde, and they're described in explicit detail, the way the demons look, what sort of dialogue they hold with Solomon, what jobs he gave them when he enslaved them. You lay the tiles, you cut the stones. This demon will twist the rope to build the temple, essentially the divine, single, holiest place of Judaism. Now, what the Testament of Solomon really is a description of how a structure that people who came later, sort of after the fall of civilization, had some level of difficulty explaining how such an immaculate location had even been built by people who only really a few centuries before this era that it's literally speaking of, although it's speaking of it retroactively. They didn't really have the means to do so. They were living in a skin tent. No, the best structure they could make would have maybe a stone foundation, but would have been mostly wood. Maybe a tomb or a hut, or living in a cave, a tunnel that they carved out or something. And so it could be a little bit difficult to explain. Now, you have this happen within other spiritual systems where a specific location is said to have been built in a divine manner. You'd think of like the oracle at Delphi. The sort of big round sphere that they had there was supposedly like chiseled by divine means, even though, of course, humans actually made it. But the work is perhaps most notable. For those interested in the occult, the work is most notable for naming and describing demons. Essentially as a relatively good guide to this sort of primordial demonology. You've got all these attached tales from sort of the clavicles or the lesser keys about sealing up the demons in the urn and throwing it in the Sea of Galilee or something like that. Or this demon got trapped under a pillar in the temple and will be released eventually. Beelzebub comes forth to conquest. He seals one demon up in a wineskin. That's the same one. Seals it up in a wineskin, puts it under the pillar, and the demon moves the wineskin around through paranormal means to move the cornerstone or the pillar into place, and then sort of gets trapped underneath it as the temple is completed and supposedly is still there to this day. You know, if you assume that the Temple Mount that's there today is the same Temple Mount, I happen to be skeptical. I think it's just the ruins of a Roman fort and the actual temple some distance away. But if you actually believe in that, like if you were to tunnel around under here, you might find like a dilapidated compressed wineskin with a demon in it under one of these big rocks that makes up the outer foundation. It's actually a pretty interesting work. Not just from, I mean, even let's go beyond occultism. It's an interesting work. It's sort of one of these apocryphal writings. One of the more notable ones, maybe the Book of Enoch is probably the only one that rivals it in terms of distribution and interest. And I should probably, write up a variant of that at some point as well. Maybe the Gospel of Nicodemus or Bel and the Dragon or something. But it's probably the most interesting of these sort of apocryphal works. Again, it was probably written by somebody from a Christian background seeking to make a sort of cautionary tale because, of course, after doing all of these wondrous things, what does Solomon do? He crushes some grasshoppers, some locusts in his hands, as a token sacrifice to his pagan wife's deities, and he just turns deaf and dumb. He goes completely retard mode after that, becomes a laughing stock. He can't hold his bowels shut. He pisses on himself. He just gibbers unintelligible babble all day. And so the formerly strongest, wisest, most benevolent supreme ruler that everybody in the known world at the time really venerated and thought he has the answers to everything, he just becomes a gibbering fool. So there's a little bit of a cautionary message here too, but ultimately most people are probably predominantly interested in the demonic side of it, which is most of the content, so you won't be disappointed if that's what you want. So again, link in the description to where you can purchase my edition of the Testament of Solomon off Amazon. Second link to the books blog, approaching 60 edited works alone that are now available. I finished the aphorisms today of Urbigerus, I believe. It's a little bit of a strange word, Barrow-Bigerus or something like that. I probably should get it right before I make a video specifically on that specific work. The Regimen Sanitatis is done as well and will be available and put on the blog fairly soon. So that's about all. Peace out.